Hello, party people, and welcome to a special edition of Cubanidad in English because today we're talking about the war in the Ukraine. It's very important that we discuss what's going on in the Ukraine because the media has gone completely off the rails, and the lies that are being spread about the conflict in the Ukraine are just outrageous, and many people are being fooled into supporting Ukrainian nationalism, neo fascism, and NATO expansion. So, my people, this is a very important topic. It's very important that we learn exactly and precisely what is going on in the Ukraine so that we are not tricked by the global imperialist media that is corporate owned and controlled and is completely manipulating everything about this war in Ukraine. In fact, what inspired me to do this video is that my Facebook account has been censored like 3 times just for posting pictures of Ukrainian nationalists flying Nazi flags with swastikas so that people can learn about who they're supporting, and my account gets flagged. Facebook is deliberately, is purposefully, mindfully censoring anything that is any information that exposes the truth about what is happening in the Ukraine and is basically working the worst instincts of the American people and using Russophobic tactics. I mean, these are fascist tactics that are leftovers from the 80s, 70s Cold War and that have been revived and were spurred on by Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party when they did everything they could to stop a moderate socialist like Bernie Sanders from being elected. And we had the Trump backlash. And then they did it again with Biden. And now the Pentagon is basically going full steam ahead with this robbery of the Ukraine that is completely unacceptable, and to do it to boot, they've armed fascist death squads that are going around committing genocide and murdering political opponents. So that's why it's very important for me to come on here and set the record straight, and everyday people learn what is going on in the Ukraine. Let's set everything into context. First of all, basically, in recent historical uh, a recent historical layout, we can observe the Ukraine basically after the fall of the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed, all of the former Soviet republics became independent. And in these republics, like Georgia, for example, Bielorussia, um, Czechoslovakia, all these different former Soviet republics, they basically now had new democratic, or they had new bourgeois democratic governments, and they basically had elections and the Ukraine, and in the Ukraine, in the first election, I forget the name of the first man who was elected, was a Ukrainian nationalist, and there was the same Russophobic, anti-Russia sentiment was being spread. But at that time, the infrastructure in the Ukraine and the Ukrainian economy was so inter. I don't know what happened there. There was an interruption. Anyways, the Ukrainian, the Ukrainian economy, the Ukrainian, uh, basically everything. The Ukraine was completely tied to Russia, and the Soviet collapse left all of the former Soviet republics in crisis. At that time, the economy was very bad, and all the former Soviet republics were going through big depressions. People were even being paid in with vodka at the time. Things were very tough, and the second president that got elected following the fall of the Soviet Union was more had a different perspective, towards was more favorable towards Russia at the time, and turned to Russia, and this helped the Ukrainian economy. And at the time that all these former Soviet republics were going through this horrible crisis, they were basically uh, finding an exit to their economic woes and getting back online. So basically, from the fall of the Soviet Union until more recent times, all of the presidents of the Ukraine have been aligned with Russia, and the Ukrainian economy has been intrinsically tied with the Russian economy, trade, commerce, all sorts of intercourse. Russia and the Ukraine have been like a ring on a finger. But there's a right wing opposition in the Ukraine that is very reactionary. Historically, the Ukraine was an ally of Hitler Germany, and there's a fascist uh, Ukrainian nationalist movement that had been gaining strength and had been given life to by the European Union and by Washington, who supports different groups, different political groups on the right abroad. All of these political groups that are funded by NGOs from Washington and by groups like the National Endowment for Democracy, uh, they receive funds to destabilize foreign governments, and they have a plan for regime change, what they call regime change. And these groups basically have been doing these sabotage regime change plans all over the globe. This is not particular to the Ukraine. In fact, we've seen this in Hong Kong with the democracy movement. We've seen this in Venezuela with the support for the so-called President Juan Guaido. We've seen this in Nicaragua with the street blocks. We've seen this in Cuba with supporting vandals that have come out and flipped cars, attacked police, destroyed storefronts. We see this all over the globe. And this is what was supported in the Ukraine by extreme rightists who basically were trying to force the Ukrainian government to accept a free trade deal, and a deal to join the European Union. And the president at the time, Viktor Yanukovych, who was he was the former governor of the Donetsk region before he became president. This guy was very allied with Moscow and was very pro Russia and very anti West. This guy was uh, on the left, like a liberal leftist social democrat who proposed uh, going back to creating social programs like uh, socialized healthcare, and um, they had different, basically different programs like in most socialist countries, and like they used to have during the time of the Soviet Union. But the right wing in the Ukraine, of course, just like here in the United States and all around the world, oppose these type of measures. In fact, the Ukrainian nationalists violently opposed the Yanukovych presidency, and they began having street clashes, and they began just like in Cuba, they began vandalizing in the Ukraine, fighting the police, and this caused to be deaths, and a lot of this caused injuries, deaths, all sorts of havoc. And what ended up happening was that they forced the presidency into a negotiation. The right wing was trying to lead the presidency into a coup, which is what eventually ended up happening. I forget, they're calling it some kind of revolution, where that's 100% bullshit. This was no type of revolution. This was 100% coup. In any revolution, there are revolutionaries. Where are the Ukrainian revolutionaries? Name one Ukrainian. There's no Ukrainian. There was no revolution. There was a coup. Basically, President Yanukovych was strong armed into negotiations because of the violent clashes that were happening in the Maidan Square, and these, because he didn't accept the package, the free trade agreement package to join the European Union, and he didn't accept the loans from the European Union. He didn't take their fucking imperialist money. They didn't want their dirty imperialist trash money to come into the Ukraine then and take whatever they want. Fuck no. So Yanukovych said no to the European Union. He said no to the imperialists, and instead he took a loan from Moscow. And instead he turned his back to against the West and towards Russia, and that pissed them off. And the right wingers went crazy, and the CIA armed thugs, these neo Nazis waving flags with swastikas. I mean, I got pictures, and I'm gonna show these pictures. These people are waving flags with swastikas. They come in and they just begin massacring the government supporters. While I talk, I'm going to try to bring up some of these pictures so that you can see what I'm talking about. But these people are fucking Nazis. These people are full fledged fucking neo fascist Nazis. So, what did they do? They strong armed President Yanukovych into negotiations, and at those negotiations, they come to an agreement. When the president leaves, the negotiation, what happens? His limousine gets shot at. They begin to shoot at his limousine, and that ended. That basically, that attempt against his life led him to leave to a town, his native town, and then he went to Crimea, and from Crimea he ended up exiling in Russia for his safety because they were trying to murder him. And I mean, these are CIA-backed thugs, and you know, so this guy gets away, but he's the legitimate constitutional president. So what do? They play parliamentary games instead of impeaching the president Yanukovych or bringing him up on some kind of charge because there was nothing. He didn't commit any type of crime. He just fled for his safety. What did they do? They basically said that he was illegitimate because he could not fulfill the functions of his presidency because of him leaving. So they say he forfeited the presidency, and they voted in the parliament that at that time they had killed off and they had blocked off all the progressive Ukrainian parliamentarians and the people from the ruling party at the time, the democratically elected ruling party. They were all blocked off, so only the right wingers were in the parliament, and then they voted for this fucking trumped up bullshit kangaroo court fucking law that they passed. Oh, this guy is not in town, so he can't fulfill his duty. Boom, he's not the president anymore. Bullshit. And then they put in their fucking U.S. CIA uh, finger appointed puppet. And this is what happened. This is their so-called revolution. That's not no fucking revolution. That's not a revolution. That's bullshit. That's a fucking coup. And the Ukrainian government is an illegitimate, fascist, neo, everything wrong government. They're completely illegitimate, and the only people backing them are the greedy motherfuckers that are trying to steal the Ukraine. And I'm going to talk about that because why steal the Ukraine? The Ukraine is one of the most important, the geopolitical, strategically. The Ukraine is insane about how important geopolitical strategic location, its resources, everything about the Ukraine. The Ukraine is like the sweetest fucking fruit in the motherfucking bush. And they're trying to steal it. They're dirty. They're trying to steal it. They're trying to steal it, and then they can't get they know they're thirsty for it. They're not giving up and they're not backing down, and even fucking Facebook is in on it. These motherfuckers are nasty with it, nasty with it. And so these fucking fascists start repressing and murdering the left wing opposition that just was ousted from legitimate elected democratic government. So the Constitution has been broken, and these fucking fascists start going after people from the ruling party, and they start going after all the communists, and they start going after my comrades, and they start killing and arresting and murdering all the trade union leaders and all the communists. And they fucking go into the Central Trade Union headquarters and they surround it with fucking the neo-fascists with swastikas and all, with fucking Nazi flags. They go into the Central Trade Union headquarters and they have military grade weapons, and the trade unionists have nothing. Nothing. If anything, maybe a bat and a broomstick or something, but they had nothing. And these fucking Nazis went in there and they fucking gathered my comrades, took them up to the top floors of the fucking union building, and they began to murder them by throwing them out the window. By throwing my comrades out the fucking window. And the fucking CNN, where were you, motherfuckers? Where was MSNBC? Where was anybody? These motherfuckers were complicit. They were quiet while these neo-Nazis, Ukrainian nationalists, were murdering Ukrainian trade unionists, great men, working men, men that made the lives of their fellow co-workers better by organizing unions. And this is what they began doing, murdering my comrades. And when they got tired and they saw that wasn't working fast enough, they rounded them up and they locked them in and they burned the trade union headquarters down, and they burned my comrades alive. And they burned communists and Ukrainian communists and trade unionists alive. And these are the fucking fascists you're supporting, you stupid idiot. You're being misled. You're being bamboozled. You're being led astray, run amok. I'm telling you, you're being manipulated. What's happening in the Ukraine, you're supporting fascism. You're supporting the Nazis. These motherfuckers, nobody said anything. Nobody said anything while these people were murdering and killing their own Ukrainian people. And so what happened in April? In April, finally, when they did enough of killing political people, they started going after ethnic Russians, and they began massacring and committing genocide against ethnic Russians because they want to create a pure Ukraine. These fucking Nazis, and they started going in and started killing fucking Russians. And in April 2014, the Lugansk People's Republic and the Donetsk People's Republic were created. And these Ukrainian Russians began to defend themselves and fight back against these Nazis who stole the seat of power in the Ukraine, who are illegitimately in power through the force of weapons and using Nazi death squads. And they're at war, and nobody has said anything. And as time passes, I forget to mention that also Crimea was annexed to Russia through a referendum where more than 99% of the people of Crimea voted to become part of Russia because the fucking Ukrainian Nazis were coming in to murder them all. And while Russia was supporting Crimea, at the same time, the Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk were left to their own devices and were being basically shelled and fucking bombed by the fucking Ukrainian Nazis. And while this is happening, nobody is saying shit. Where was anybody? No, the only press that was talking about this is the left. The only press where I could find out what was happening at the Donetsk People's Republic or Lugansk People's Republic was in leftist newspapers, was on leftist websites. Nowhere in any of the main imperialist garbage press, the New York Times or fucking CNN or MSNBC or none of these motherfuckers did I hear anything about what was happening in the Ukraine. And these motherfuckers are being, bravely fighting against these fascists. And a humanitarian situation is getting worse and worse and worse. I mean, if I believe that it was a grave error that Russia waited this long to fucking finally get in the mix. I mean, that was a big mistake on Russia's. They didn't see that this was gonna fucking get out of hand. This is fucking crazy. So fucking while the people of Donetsk and the people of Lugansk are fighting for their survival against the Western imperialist backed Ukrainians. And I mean, I even seen on Facebook there was a collection, like if it was a charity collection where they collected $20 million for the war effort in the Ukraine. Are you kidding me? $20 million so those Nazis could keep killing uh, their own people and killing uh, ethnic Russians in the Ukraine. This is insane, and the all over the world, the imperialist media is supporting this type of shit. So what happens? They try to cover up their Nazi. They try to cover up their Nazi fucking their whole Nazi game by putting this guy Zelensky, who's a token, into the presidency. Oh, because he's a Jewish uh, person, he can't be a Nazi. That's 100% bullshit. Fuck, one of the most far right Nazi ideologies today is Zionism, and we know how Zionism is completely a complete form of fascism. It's the same colonial settler occupying. Uh, no, and they have the same colonial settler imperialist interests. The Ukrainian nationalists are all Christian. If you look at the statistics, the Ukraine is like a crazy high amount Christian, like 80% Christian or something. And they have a very small Jewish population in comparison. And these Ukrainian nationalists are also, he's their token, and even as a token, it doesn't block because some of the most Nazi far right fascists that I know are Zionists. So I don't that whole thing. You gotta be simple minded. You basically have to be a very feeble minded idiot to believe that there are not Jewish fascists and Nazi Zionists. And even during World War II, during the during Hitler fascism, there were plenty of Jewish um, Nazi not only enablers, but people who worked functionaries of the Nazi regime that were Jewish and and were used to murder the rest of the Jewish population, amongst the many other murdered populations like the communists, gays, the Romanis, and other people. And the Nazis basically wanted to murder and commit genocide against the different ethnicities in Europe and colonize and Germanize their lands, including the Ukraine, which is what is the most ironic, because even though the Ukrainians in the 1940s were allies of Hitler and they had their own fascist dictator Stepan Banderas, even though they were allies and the German Nazis didn't give a fuck, they still wanted to wipe out the Ukrainians and then Germanize and colonize the Ukraine. Why the Ukraine? Why is the Ukraine the sweetest fruit in the bush? The Ukraine is the sweetest fruit in the bush right now because of the Ukraine's geopolitical strategic location. The strategic minerals, strategic gases. The Ukraine is within the sphere of Russian influence. And if it passes into our sphere of influence, not ours, but I mean Western imperialism sphere of influence, then that would be so, I mean, that would be amazing. That's exactly, the capitalists are dying for that, and they're in this war. They're not going to stop because they feel it. They can taste it. They have the Ukraine. They almost rob. They can feel that they're getting away with it. So what's so important about the Ukraine? First of all, the Ukraine is Eastern Europe's breadbasket. The Ukraine is where most of the wheat, rye, and grains are grown that are the basic staple of the Eastern European diet of bread. The Ukraine is Eastern Europe's breadbasket. Immense fields of wheat. I mean, that is just that in itself, and to take that away from a rival, a competitor, a rival like Russia, that used to be number two in the world, maybe side to side rival with the U.S. when they were the Soviet Union, to get that away from them, oof, and to gain that for yourself, for your exploitation, for your markets and your capital. Oh my God, that in itself, they're jizzing in their pants thinking about that. But what else? What else? Well, a lot of people maybe don't realize, but also the Ukraine is one of the only places in the world where neon gas is produced. Neon gas, the same gas that lights up the Hollywood and Las Vegas Strip, the New York Times Square. But actually, neon lights are only like a small percentage of the industrial use for the neon gas. What's so important about neon gas is that it's used to make high strength lasers that are used to in industry for cutting, and they're mainly used to cut circuit boards that are necessary for electronic components of all types, for microchips, circuit boards. Right now, there's, even without this war and even without the pandemic, there was a strong what you would call it, there was a need for microchips, a shortage. There was a big shortage of microchips, and without neon gas, which is needed to produce these microchips, There's no way of getting that. And right now, we got to negotiate with the Ukraine. We got to negotiate with the Russia, with that sphere of influence if we want access to that. The other place in the world that where neon gas is produced for industrial exploitation is in China. But unlike the Ukrainian neon gas, all the infrastructure is new and it's not the quality is not the same, and they're just getting started with that over there in China. And but in the Ukraine, all the infrastructure, all the know-how, everything, it's all laid out. It's good to go. It's plug and play. So imagine if that came into the Western imperialist sphere of influence. At least then it would have to, if the Russians, when they need that gas, they would have to come politely asking, negotiating with us. But now we have to go politely negotiating with them or with the Chinese, which is another potential enemy or competitor, may I say, because this is the imperialist. It's all competition, economic competition, capitalist economic competitions and markets. And as long as there's capitalism and imperialism, there will be war. You can you cannot end war unless you end capitalism. So the capitalists are tasting it. Another strategic mineral that the Ukraine has, nickel. And they got good nickel. The Ukraine has the world's second largest reserve of nickel. Guess who has the largest reserve of nickel? Unexploited virgin nickel. Cuba, the little socialist island only 90 miles away, is the world's largest reserve of untapped nickel, and only second to it is the Ukraine. So Cuba, who we have a blockade, Cuba, where we can't access Cuba, which is there's in the Cuba and the United States are enemies. They can't get their nickel from Cuba. They don't want to get their nickel from Cuba because they want to maintain the blockade. So, but if they got the nickel from the Ukraine, holy shit! If they got the nickel from the Ukraine, then damn, they would this it would fall into their laps, and they're tasting it. They're going nuts. They're going nuts. They're jizzing in their pants, and they want to steal the Ukraine, and they're using all the imperialist media, their press, Facebook, everything, and just the out of my entire life and all the wars that I've seen, all the bullshit lies that I've seen, like the first Gulf War in 1990, when the Kuwaiti, the sheikh, the daughter of the Kuwaiti sheikh, went before the United Nations and said that the Iraqis were killing babies in incubators, or the other bullshit lie of Colin Powell in the United Nations saying that they had weapons of mass destruction with his little PowerPoint presentation, even though Hans Blix and the UN weapons inspectors were like, "Yo, there's nothing here. There's nothing here." So, no, they have weapons of mass destruction. Out of all the crazy lies that I've seen, and everything has been a lie since the Spanish American War, the USS Maine, to the fucking Pearl Harbor, to get us into World War II, to the Gulf of Tonkin, to get us into fucking Vietnam. The lies that are being spread today about the Ukraine are crazy, are unbelievable, and how even the so-called liberals, the so-called counterfeit left, is just going off on this Russophobic war hawk. I mean, they just, and so there's people who we come in contact with day to day at the trade union, at work, and you think, wow, they're progressive people, and they're fucking on some Russophobic Cold War shit and on this anti-Putin. Who gives a shit about Putin? Look at what's happening, people. You're being tricked. Your support, it's just like the free Tibet people who are are tricked into supporting fucking feudal slavery and serfdom for fucking Tibet. Anyways, and these people are being completely fooled, are being completely tricked, and the way that the news is just manipulating all that is happening in the Ukraine, and the way that things are being censored, and the way that Facebook is censoring everything, people have to know what is going on in the Ukraine. I mean, I've seen the Ukrainian missiles shot into Russia that were knocked down by Russia's anti-missile defense system, and then the if something gets knocked out of the sky, what goes up must come down. So this missile shot by the Ukraine into Russia gets knocked down by an anti-missile defense system, and then it lands on a building, and then they blame, look at what the Russians did. They're bad. Oh my god. Just the way the news is being manipulated, it's unbelievable. And the way how CNN is manipulating the there was that famous case of that reporter that was killed in Afghanistan, and now later he's killed in the Ukraine. It's unbelievable how Facebook is blocking as soon as you post up pictures of Ukrainian nationalists and flying their swastika flags, they will block. They will take it down. First of all, they will take it down, and they will block you, saying that you committed some kind of community guidelines violations, and then you can't even comment. You can't do anything, and they say that there's an opportunity. If you disagree, there's an opportunity for it to be reviewed, but that because of the pandemic and everything, it's going to take too long. So that they're backed up. So basically, by the time that their 7 day censorship finishes, there was no time for it to be reviewed, and it's time. You just got censored for 7 days while people are commenting, and they never got to see the photos that you posted of the evidence of the neo-fascists with their swastika flags, and people make stupid little comments like, "How could he be a Nazi if he's Jewish? If Zelensky is Jewish, how could he be a Nazi?" And you can't even reply. You can't even respond. And and when you don't respond because you can't, it makes it look like they feel like they're correct, and it spirals out of control. And this is what's happening on social networking sites all over. And it happened to me personally twice on two different accounts. So right now, I cannot post on any of my accounts, one for 14 days, the other for 7 days. And people have no idea what's happening in the Ukraine because everything is completely out of context. So while the Ukrainian nationalists are bombing the Russian ethnic population of eastern Ukraine, and the Russians come in to defend them, and because the Russians would not accept the expansion of NATO into the Ukraine, it's like if the Russians have committed some type of aggression. This is both the aggressors have been the Ukrainian nationalists, have been the imperialists who armed the protesters, who armed the Nazi death squads, who funded the regime change groups, who attempted against the life of former President Viktor Yanukovych, who then took over the country and led a severe repression and murder of hundreds of comrades, the jailing of hundreds of comrades. Right now, we're writing Zelensky to free our Komsomol comrades. The Komsomol is the communist youth of the Ukraine. My comrade Michael and Alexander Kananov, who are in jail for the only reason of being members of the communist youth in the Ukraine. Just for being young communists, they're in Ukrainian dungeons. Who knows what type of tortures these people have faced? Who knows how they're being treated? I mean, this is insane, and it gets worse. Everything gets worse. Why? If these we're regular people. Most of the people who watch this, who are going to watch this video, are average working people, are regular people. But people who are fucking Nazis, people who are right wing fascists, who go to right wing Nazi reactionary websites, who read right wing fucking Nazi magazines, who read right wing reactionary fucking publications and shit like that. These motherfuckers have been following what's been happening in the Ukraine for a long time. And they've been very happy about it. And they've been feeling emboldened by everything that's been happening in the Ukraine. And it's like their spot is, it's like right now they're in a war and they're winning and they feel happy, and because they're being backed by Western European imperialism and U.S. imperialism, which are fucking Nazi groups. The NATO is a fucking Nazi organization. See, this is the thing. The United States is fucking a step away from German Nazi. A lot of people don't realize how close the United States oligarchs are to German Nazi fascism, and how close big business was to German Nazi fascism. People don't even realize that it was the founding fathers of the United States that inspired Hitler. If you read Mein Kampf, how Hitler admired the founding fathers of the United States, and how he viewed them as an inspiration for what he was later going to create and failed at, because there was a glorious Red Army at the time that put an end to his bullshit. Which this is what I'm afraid of. Right now, there's no fucking Red Army that's gonna put an end to this bullshit. And these fucking Nazis are everywhere. In Europe, it's been years since Obama, when it was the fucking Tea Party, all that was coming up. Fucking Nazis were being emboldened all over the world. I saw Nazis in Greece. The what were they called? The dawning shining dawn something. There's fucking Nazis in Turkey, fucking Nazis in Austria, Nazis in Belgium, Nazis in the UK. There's neo-fascist, neo-Nazis all over the motherfucking place. There's fucking Nazis in the United States. They fucking marched with torches, and fucking Trump called them good people. And there's fucking all sorts of Nazis and Klansmen that are fucking watching the Ukraine, and that's their little pet right now. And they feel very happy about what their Nazi brothers are doing in the Ukraine, and they're feeling emboldened. And those Nazis know that they're being supported by Western imperialism, and they're very happy about it. And they're being smart about it too. But at the same time, they're open with their shit. It's not like they're hiding their swastikas or they're hiding their SS emblems on their fucking uniforms. They have them right there for the whole world to see, which is what's fucking crazy. And the only thing is that the press is picturing these people like heroes and like the victims of Russian aggression, which is complete bullshit. And they're using Russophobia and leftover Cold War propaganda bullshit sentiments to spark this shit. And it's fucking idiotic how it's working. And a lot of old motherfuckers are buying into it. Because there's a lot of motherfuckers that really bought into that Russophobic, anti Russia, anti communist shit in the fucking 80s, 90s, 70s. Even the fucking the Trotskyists, they have that shit because they never supported the Soviet Union to begin with. To them, that was a Stalinist bureaucracy, and so they've always had this Russophobic, anti-Russia shit, and now these fucking Democrats and so-called leftists, they've been they've been fucking parroting this Russiagate shit since Trump was in power. And I've been telling these people, yo, it's bullshit. Why are you drumming up uh, war drums against Russia? Oh, there's not gonna be no war with Russia. The Russian bots, they elected Trump. Oh, complete bullshit. Complete bullshit. Everybody knows that the whole entire country was poised to vote Bernie Sanders into power, and the machine of the Democratic Party worked its magic to nastily and very sloppily steal the election from Bernie Sanders and impose Hillary Clinton as the candidate. And this pissed off a ton of people who already had very little trust in the Democratic Party to begin with, and created a backlash. And along with the fucking Nazi fascists and Bush folks who were reeling with racism because Obama was elected, and they've been running the Tea Party for 8 years. So along with these folks, then you get the anti-Hillary backlash, and they voted Trump in, and we get this motherfucker Trump in, and because Trump basically didn't want to go to war with Putin, and supposedly this is at the time where the Google search word for golden shower was like the number one search term, when they were saying that supposedly Putin had videos of Trump and they were extorting Trump as a president, and that Putin was using leverage against Trump, and they created this whole narrative of what they call Russiagate, and they began beating the war drum against Russia at that time. And they began this whole shit all while supporting the Ukrainian Nazis because it was them who had this regime change plan all along. And they have this plan not only for the Ukraine, but they have it for Hong Kong, they have it for Venezuela, they have it for Nicaragua, they have it for Cuba, they have it for North Korea, they have it everywhere. They have it everywhere. And this is what happened in the Ukraine. And that whole Russiagate bullshit that was a creation of MSNBC with their figurehead, I forget her name, but I can't. All she did, Russia, 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 Russia. There's a Russophobia, and they created that narrative, and not to basically, but when Trump would get defeated, it would give perfect opportunity for the next Democratic president, which they chose because the last person anyone wanted, I mean, the most hated president ever, fucking Joe Biden. I mean, that election was such a bad election, and this is the motherfucker they came up with, and so this guy is full head on into the Ukraine. This guy has gone full head on into Cuba, into Venezuela, into the Ukraine, and they think they basically stealing the Ukraine, and they have her, and they're thirsting for her, and they went nuts. They went nuts, but in the end, I believe that the imperialists acted too fast. They showed their cards too soon, and now they're gonna get beaten back because for some reason the Russians are the comeback kids, and let me tell you, they're coming back with a vengeance because right now a lot of the different a lot of the different countries are not supporting this war in the Ukraine and are not turning their backs to Russia. In fact, even right wing U.S. puppet regimes like the Bolsonaro regime in Brazil is saying no, that they can't. They're doing business with Russia. You saw what the president of Pakistan, that motherfucker came out and said, "You think we're your slaves?" I mean, this is getting interesting now. So I hope that this video contributes to people, just average working people, whoever hears this video can hear my perspective on the Ukraine. It's a Marxist perspective, an anti-imperialist perspective, and in my opinion, what needs to happen and what would be the worst thing to happen. What would be the worst thing to happen is for the Ukrainian neo-fascists to be successful, for the Nazis, the neo-Nazis, and neo-fascists around the world, in Europe and in the United States and around the world, to be emboldened by seeing this victory, and for imperialism to gain such important strategic minerals and gases and opened uh, new markets to be able to expand their products into new markets and to just gain an entire nation of cheap labor. I mean that for imperialism, this expansion would be huge, huge. I mean, it would be the lifeline that imperialism needs because the imperialism is on its way out. I mean, it's a dying beast that is just throwing wild punches because it's being knocked the fuck out and it's destroying wild punches. And if they win in the Ukraine, it would be the worst thing that can happen for working people all around the world. I mean, it would be an immense victory for fascism and for all these neo Nazis. It would be huge, huge victory for European imperialism and against communism. NATO was created. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization was created as a tool to destroy communism and to destroy the Soviet Union. The whole purpose of NATO was to destroy the Soviet Union. In 1990, when the Soviet Union collapsed and the Soviet republics be dissolved and became independent federal republics, NATO did not dissolve. NATO did not go away. NATO did not disarm. World peace was not created. Instead, NATO was expanded. Just like Operation Paperclip after World War II, that used a bunch of Nazis to further U.S. interests in the space race and to bring German Nazi scientists into the United States to help us leverage against the Soviets in the Cold War. Just like Operation Paperclip, NATO was created. When NATO was created, their first generals, their first officers, their military, they were former Nazis. When Germany was divided into the German Democratic Republic and Federal Germany, the Federal German Republic was founded with former fucking Nazis. Their military was built with former fucking Nazis. West Berlin, West Germany was fucking led by former fucking Nazis. The United States were allies in World War II against the Nazis, but the United States ruling class were Nazis. Were pro-German Nazis. The capitalists, Rockefeller, Ford, DuPont, Mellon, all of these motherfuckers were Nazis. They supported German fucking fascism. And that's how fucking Hugo Boss designed the fucking SS uniforms. And that's how fucking Bayer Medical Company used Holocaust prisoners to do fucking guinea pig experiments to come up with their fucking aspirin and other medications. And fucking IBM gave computing devices and those famous not tattoos of Holocaust prisoners were numbers that IBM basically developed to compute the number of Jews being rounded up to be murdered, to be killed, and that's how they were computing how many Jews that they had exterminated in their camps and how many were left. It was fucking IBM and fucking Union Bank that was led by the Bushes, by Prescott Bush, was laundering Nazi money in the United States. Fucking fucking Ford gave technology to the fucking Nazis so that their Panzer units and their fucking infantry cars would be fucking optimal for war. And they didn't do that for the US Army, they did that for the fucking Nazis. DuPont Chemical Company developed antifreeze. The fucking Nazis had antifreeze in their vehicles, something that the US Army people didn't have. These are all American capitalists. They fucking hired American Marine, the founder of the US Marines, General Smedley Butler, to they hired him as a mercenary to make a coup against President FDR, against Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And Smedley Butler, who pretended to be a fascist and pretended to go along with their plans, used the fact that they trusted him to gather as much information about this coup that they were planning against FDR. And when the motherfucker gives up the information and snitches and drops dime on these fascist pigs, the fucking US government, instead of coming down on these motherfuckers and executing them as they should have for being war criminals and traitors and treason, no, but who gets killed? Who do they murder? Julius and Ethel Rosenberg? But here you have fucking Nazis paying a U.S. general money to make a coup against the president of the United States to create a fascist America, a fascist republic, and nothing happens. Just a slap on the wrist, closed door congressional sessions. This is the history of the United States. These are the American Nazis who were never tried in Nuremberg and then who were rescued with Operation Paperclip, who were used in Europe to kill, murder, maim, Operation Gladio. And what's happening? These fucking Ukrainian nationalists are being used today to further U.S. imperialist interests and expand NATO into the Ukraine, to make the Ukraine part of the European Union, to steal their resources, and for the imperialists to gain very important strategic mineral and gas resources. This is what's happening. This is what's at stake in the Ukraine. And this is why what's important for the working people of the world, for working class people of the world, in this inter-imperialist conflict, whether the Ukraine remains under the sphere of influence of Russia or comes over and is stolen by the West and becomes property of Western imperialism and becomes part of Western sphere of influence, the what is worse for the working people of the world is for is for the Ukrainian Nazis to win, embolden the Nazis of the world and the neo-fascists of the world who are watching what's happening in the Ukraine. And if they win in the Ukraine, can you imagine with how much more strength they will come down in the other European countries, and how much more strength, how emboldened these fascists will be all over Europe, in Spain, in Greece, in Italy, in Austria, in Belgium, and all over in Finland, all over Europe. And the wave of reaction in some countries, something like the Ukraine may happen. In others, progressive institutions might disappear, privatizations might go through, uh, social programs might disappear, Nazis will push through the different laws and whatever bullshit they can. And here in the United States, a new wave of fascism, uh, probably led by Trump. I mean, and right now the Democrats are fucking leading this support for Ukrainian fascism. So my people, what working people of the world need is for these fascists to be smashed, for the Ukraine to be smashed. The Russia Russia today, in this conflict, in this specific conflict, Russia lies within the camp of the anti-imperialist camp. In this specific conflict, we have the same interests in common and the same enemy in common, which is Western imperialism. And Russia is proposing a solution which is acceptable, which is they're not going to occupy the Ukraine. They're proposing denazification of the Ukraine and to disarm the Ukraine and for the Ukraine to remain independent of NATO. All of these are completely acceptable on all sides for, I believe, any Marxist, any reasonable Marxist or working person would accept that. In this position, Russia clearly falls within the anti-imperialist camp, and we have interests in common. The defense of the Lugansk People's Republic and Donetsk People's Republic is important for us and our movement, and the defeat of the Ukrainian Nazis is important. The defeat of the Ukrainian Nazis is a defeat of Nazism around the world and white supremacy around the world. It would be another defeat of the so called supreme race by people of color, by Slavic people. And it would be a defeat against NATO and Western and European imperialism. And this is what we this is what will help benefit working people around the world. And it would stop the hand of imperialism from further strengthening itself to come down on other nations. And what we need right now is for the world, the working we need working people around the world to come basically to unite, and we need people to step up and as real anti-imperialists and begin to create an independent political movement, independent of the Democrats, independent of all bourgeois politics, because look how easy they slid everyone into supporting reactionary Ukrainian nationalism and neo fascism. So this is my perspective on what's happening in the Ukraine. If anybody would like to say anything or anything, I could share the link, and people could come up on the StreamYard and say a few words. But right now, this is my perspective on what's happening in the Ukraine, and I hope that people will learn the truth and will not be manipulated by Western pro imperialist corporate controlled media and Facebook and lied to into supporting Ukrainian nationalism and neo fascism and the expansion of NATO. Say no to NATO, say no to the Ukraine, no to fascism, support the people in Donetsk, support the people of Lugansk, all power to the people, down with US imperialism, down with European imperialism, workers of the world unite.